When I was in school, our desks were in rows and we were rarely allowed to speak or talk to those around us. The teacher did all the talking, and some of that involved asking us questions for which we did our best to answer. Now that verbal engagement, or interaction if you like, is simply called classroom discussion or discourse. In this episode, I'm going to explore the importance of language development and discourse in mathematics instruction. And this topic is one of the big four influences, strategies, or actions that have been proven to have a positive impact on student outcomes. In part one of this episode, I introduced this book by John Hattie, where he showed or developed a tool for comparing the various influences, strategies, or actions that have proven to have a positive impact on learning. I'm not going to repeat all that now because you can go back and watch that episode if you wish. But in short, we're looking for an effect size that is greater than 40 hundredths. And that hinge point, 40 hundredths, is equivalent to 1 year of schooling. So we're wanting an effect greater than that because it gives you a greater return on your efforts. Integrating learning with prior experiences is the first of the big four influences, strategies, or actions. It was shown to have an effect size of 93 hundredths. That's more than 2 years of growth for each year of schooling. Well worth considering. Part two of this series revealed the second of the big four, which is spaced practice or learning. It has an effect size of 60 hundredths, which means that students can realise 1.5 years of learning in one school year if they're being taught mathematics using this approach. Now let's discover the third of the big four. We now know from the science of learning that we learn new ideas by connecting them to ideas that we already know. And the only tool we have to make the connection is our language. Now, language is the basis of all classroom discourse. So let's start by looking at the importance of vocabulary development. Let me share a little story with you. Many years ago, I was in the US working with a first grade class, a small group of students, on subtraction. I was sharing stories such as there's 6 birds sitting on the fence, 2 flew away, how many are left? And the students started acting these out. And I distinctly remember this one little girl, she put the 6 cubes out like this, and she says, 6 birds sitting on the fence, and she covered up 2, she said, there's 4 left. I said, very good. So I repeated this process using different stories and different numbers. And they got them all correct in terms of their answer, and they modelled them correctly, which is very important. So I decided to put all the cubes away, and I wrote down this, 5 take away 1. So I had this in front of them. I said, what's 5 take away 1? And the same little girl at the start, she said to me, 5. And I was stunned and rather disappointed. So I said to her, how did you get 5? And she says, well, if you start with 5 and take away 1, you're left with 5. That little girl was using or modelling language that was better suited to the hands-on cubes that she was using early in activity, because she could take away 2, and she was definitely covering up 2. And unfortunately, that action doesn't translate with the use of symbols. As I pointed out in an earlier episode, we need to start by using language that the students already know. As I shared stories, I was using everyday language, such as the birds flew away and the frogs jumped away. As the stories were acted out, the students modelled the language that was unique to the materials, such as takeaway or even cover up. In subsequent activities, they would develop precision with their language using mathematical terms such as subtract or even minus, before being introduced to the symbolic language involving the subtraction sign, which is simply an abbreviation of all the language that came before. Now, I learned my lesson that day. If you race too fast to the symbolic stage, it will come at a cost of their understanding. So why focus on the careful development of language? Well, as I said before, language or vocabulary is the basis of classroom discourse. You can't have engaging discourse without the use of strong and accurate vocabulary. And if that's not enough to convince you, have a look at Hattie's research. He found that programs that focus on vocabulary development had an effect size of 67/100ths. That's an additional 7 to 8 months growth for each year of instruction. But this episode is less about vocabulary and more about classroom discourse. And by that I mean the discourse between the teacher and the students and among the students themselves. Now, I can't share or explain how to create discourse now, as that's a topic for another episode, but I can quickly share some of the benefits. This list is not complete, but discourse is known to engage learners, promote understanding, uncover student misconceptions, build confidence. It supports an inclusive learning environment when all the students are encouraged to participate in the conversation. And it improves communication skills. And these are just to name a few. But as an employer in my own business, I find that last point to be most interesting or most important. When we work to promote or encourage discussion in our classroom, we are working to develop or improve student communication skills. Now, our job as educators is to prepare students for society. You want them to go out, get a good job, and to make a good living. A 2015 study of skills that are required to get a job shows an interesting trend over time. The researchers found that if you had low math skills and poor social skills, your ability to get a job was trending down over several decades. Essentially, employers had no need for that skill set. What I found interesting is even if you had high math skills and poor social skills, then your chances of getting a job were also trending down. Now, this contrasts with those who had either low or high math skills, but they had high social skills. Both of these groups' chances were trending up. But how does classroom discussion or discourse score in Hattie's research? He found that teachers who focused their energy on building classroom discourse were likely to see 2 years of learning gains for every year of schooling. Now, that is impressive and well worth the effort, considering there is little to no cost involved. So this is what I want you to do. 1, make a change for the better. Learn all you can about how to initiate effective discourse in your classroom with your students or at home with your children. And stay tuned for future episodes where I can share some ideas with you. And 2, in the meantime, change the layout of your classroom. Get the students out of rows and into small groups. Or if you are uncomfortable with that, make a designated area where children can go and work in a small group to discuss their ideas. Now, if you're a homeschooler, rely less on the digital devices. You have the perfect opportunity to initiate valuable or powerful conversations with your child or children. And finally, if you've seen value in this episode, give us a thumbs up and subscribe today so you never miss another learning opportunity with me. See you next time.